A new study, most recently published in Nature Neuroscience, offers one of the clearest explanations to date as to how the human brain rapidly routes information across large-scale networks to support attention. Although attention is often described as a spotlight of focus, the underlying neural machinery that enables this spotlight to shift, intensify, or prioritize certain stimuli in real time has remained extremely elusive. The new research that we're going to be covering today reveals that the brain relies on brief, very high frequency bursts of neural activities to create temporal windows that allow fast and precise communication across distant regions of the brain. These bursts, called high frequency activity bursts of electrical activity, act as signatures of population transitions that open the gates to information to flow within our brain. One of the most important findings of this paper was that these bursts of electrical activities were dynamically coupled to low frequency brainwaves rhythms, where slow oscillations or brainwaves set to broader temporal context of neural processing, while the fast and high bursts created the discrete windows that carried the actual content of communication of information. When these high brainwaves frequency bursts were strongly tied to the slow rhythms of brainwaves, or when they became abnormally decoupled, behavioral accuracy changed. The strength of the cue evoked burst of electrical activities and the degree to which they loosened their tie to low frequency rhythms reliably predicted how accurately a participant would detect a target, for example. This means that attention is not only a matter of where the brain directs resources, but also how well it can modulate the timing relationship between slow and fast neural dynamics. This study also found that these very high frequency bursts synchronized across the entire brain in distinct patterns. Cue presentations, for example, activated one subnetwork at a time, while targets activated another. These subnetworks were not static. They demonstrated clear lead and lag relationships. When a cue was informative, for example, the cue-driven subnetwork reliably led the target-driven subnetwork upon target onset. This sequential activation suggests that the brain prepares a communication route in advance, stabilizing certain networks before the sensory evidence arrives. Once a target appears, the second subnetwork takes over, integrating the incoming sensory information with the expectation that the cue is established. Now here, the computational modeling actually offered an interpretation as to what these bursts really represent. According to the spiking network simulation, high-frequency brainwaves bursts reflect transition to a population spiking state. In other words, they mark the moment when a group of neurons collectively enters an active mode, enabling efficient information communication. These transitions from the temporal windows in which information routing become possible is very likely, and without these transitions, distant brain region would fire asynchronously, preventing the smooth flow of information that attention so much requires. Taken together, these findings reshape our understanding of attention and cognition. Instead of viewing attention as an increase in activity within specific brain region, the study shows that attention relies on the brain's ability to coordinate vast networks within millisecond precisions. These bursts of brainwaves serve as the timing mechanism that hold this coordination together. They also offer a unifying explanation as to how the brain supports flexible behavior, for example. When individuals perform well, it is not only because the right areas of the brain are activated, but also because the transitions between population network states occur at the right times and the right sequences within the brain. The implications of these findings reach beyond neuroscience in that they offer a concrete framework as to how intelligent system could emulate the biological efficiency of rapid information routing. Current artificial intelligence systems, for example, process information continuously but do not rely on temporally gated transitions in their internal network. They do not have intrinsic windows, for example, that selectively allow or block communication based on contextual demands. The brain, on the other hand, uses these transient bursts of electrical activities within the brain waves as both a timing signal as well as a routing mechanism. To put it simply, the human brain must rapidly select, prioritize, and route information in order to guide our behavior. Spatial attention, for example, is one of the clearest examples of this particular demand. When we choose to attend to a location in space, for example, or when a cue draws our attention, the brain must then reconfigure itself almost instantly as to that relevant signals need to be amplified and irrelevant ones must be suppressed. Although scientists have long known that the attention depends on coordination between sensory and associative regions of the brain, the precise mechanism that allow information to be routed at very fast time scales has been difficult to identify. And this particular new research paper in Nature Neuroscience actually addresses just that, where it identifies high frequency activity bursts of electrical signals within the brain to brief and powerful population level events that open temporal windows for rapid long range communication across the brain's networks. More importantly, this paper suggests that slow brain waves oscillations serve as broad timing structure within the brain, but they do not carry fine-grained information on their own. Instead, it is the precise momentary decoupling of a very high frequency burst of electrical waves within the brain from its underlying slow brain waves that predicted better behavioral accuracy within the participants of this study. So, for example, when a cue revoked a very strong high frequency that broke out of the slow rhythms or slow brain waves at the right moment, the subjects here then were more accurate in detecting the subsequent target that they were presented with, where this suggests that attention is not only about amplifying the relevant signals, but also about flexibly breaking away from baseline rhythms to allow rapid network reconfiguration within the brain. The spiking neural network model used in this study provided further insights by showing that very high frequency brainwaves oscillation reflect transitions into population spiking. This means that high frequency waves are not random bursts of electrical activities, but deterministic signatures of moments when the neural network changes its overall state. They act as a gate opening events that allow information to flow across distributed brain regions. During these brief windows, information communication is stronger, faster, and much more reliable. Once the burst ends, these very high frequency electrical activity, once they end, the neural network then return to a less communication baseline. This transition-based review that communication helps explain how the brain maintains both flexibility as well as stability. It can switch rapidly between states when necessary, yet remain very grounded in slower brainwaves rhythm that prevent constant instability. The implications of this study are significant for understanding how attention is implemented in real time. Attention is not a static configuration, but an active process created by a sequence of discrete neural state transitions within the brain. These very, very high frequency brainwaves oscillation provide the temporal scaffolding for this process, for example. They create communication windows, synchronize functionality relevant subnetwork, and allow the brain to adjust its routing pathways based on task demands at hand. This is a much more dynamic picture of attention than what traditional theories in neuroscience have suggested. And from a broader perspective, this research points to a principle of neural architecture that remains underappreciated. The brain does not rely on one single hierarchy of control. Instead, it uses flexible, transient, high frequency bursts of brain waves and electrical activities to coordinate otherwise independent brain regions. These bursts of electrical activity serve as connective tissue that temporarily binds sensory processing, expectation, memory, and action preparation within the brain. They allow the organism to operate in a world that demands both precision and speed. By identifying these very high frequency oscillations within the electrical activities of the brain as signatures of population state transitions, this study provides a mechanistic explanation as to how attention becomes a whole brain phenomenon rather than a purely sensory or purely cognitive event. And how do these new findings in the field of neuroscience connect to, in this case, biosignals within the next generation of artificial intelligence, as well as robotics and humanoids, as suggested per symbiotic intelligence? This work highlights the importance of temporal precision in any system that aims to integrate biological and artificial processing. If, for example, future humanoids or cognitive architecture attempt to model or interface with human attention, they will need mechanisms that replicate not only continuous neural rhythms, but also these fast, discrete bursts that enable rapid communication. And in this case, very high frequency electrical activities represent the brain's way of opening and closing routing channels in real time when it comes to information processing during attention tasks. A symbiotic intelligence system, for example, that wishes to coordinate with human cognition must then be able to recognize, predict, and or emulate these transitions. And this study, therefore, strengthens the case as to designing the next generation AI systems around population level timing events rather than static control pipelines. In symbiotic intelligence, for example, information communications become effective only when the artificial and the biological system align their temporal windows, and high frequency bursts of electrical activities in the brain offer a blueprint for how such alignment could potentially be achieved in practice. And that's all I had for today. Thank you so much for watching and liking and subscribing. I appreciate it. And let me know if you have any comments. See you guys next time. Bye.